Hello, CharterFolk. Delighted to be starting our first CharterFolk chat of 2021, and we really have a terrific group of folks to be with us. We'll bring them on right now as I begin introductions. We have three great folks. We have with us Derrell Bradford, who is our first return guest to CharterFolk chat. Derrell does so many important things across the country, but is executive vice president or senior vice president at 50 Can. We also have Pat Brantley, who is the CEO of Friendship Schools in DC, where I believe there's like 15 or 16 campuses in DC, and have just made a huge mark in our nation's capital. And then we have Diane Tavenner, who is the CEO of Summit Public Schools, with I think it's 8 schools in the Bay Area and 3 in Washington, and then has also been working on so many things across the country to support teachers and parents with new ideas about how to take on instruction along the way, writing books that we all read. And, I will also reference that Diane was the CEO of the California Charter School Association, and helped me at levels that I still call Diane and thank her for in retrospect. And Pat is serving as the board chair in Washington, D.C. So thank you to both you guys for the incredible things that you guys do for kids. But then thank you for also modeling for the rest of our movement how important it is to take on those thankless leadership roles within our advocacy organizations. I wanted to start today by try to kind of mix two things together. One is I am positing that there is something unusual. There is something new that is happening in public education. You always run this risk. Oh, this is the year of, and then add your superlative, right? We've never had blah, 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 right? And yet, I believe that it is legitimate to say that there has never been a year like 2021. I think that 2020, in retrospect, will be seen as that year where it's a very well-numbered year, 2020 clarity. We were able to see things that we have not been able to see before, right? 2021 becomes the year, do we have our acts together, and are we starting to do new things based upon what we've been able to see? I think that, if I were to, describe the overall situation, it's a fundamental disconnect, the great disconnect, as I've described in some recent posts, between what our public schools are offering and not what our parents want or not what society wants, but the bare minimum that people will accept. What helped me crystallize these thoughts was talking to incredibly smart people last year, including Derrell. And Derrell surfaced one of the most interesting comments, and I will, link it again. I think it's at the 30-50 mark or something like that in the chat that we did in November, where I was ready to go on to another topic, and then Derrell said, "I'm going to be a jerk. I'm going to be a jerk, Jed." And then he inserted this idea, and I'm just like, Derrell, if that's the measure of being a jerk, all right, bring your jerkness, to whole new levels. But you basically posited in that comment, or in that statement that COVID has changed the game, right? And there is this critical need to do new things. And if charter schools want to be able to position ourselves for the longer term to be stronger, it is absolutely critical that we innovate and be able to do what those new things are. So I thought I would start, by just coming back to you, Derrell, and seeing if you want to just revisit those comments and amplify them. The one thing I would say is the one thing that you didn't mention in there was just how there's also this layer of racial reckoning that happened in 2020, where there's just, I think, an additional element of we just will not accept what we've historically had. So do you mind just getting us started, Derrell? Revisit those comments and take it in whatever direction, your jerkness wants to.
Yeah, I mean, so thanks for having me back. I'm glad the list of people you can invite is so short that I got to come back. Yeah, that's awesome. And it is like I mean, I've been inside for like ever. You know, I'm like the good guy on the East Coast. So it is just nice to talk to people that I don't normally talk to. So thanks for having me back. Just like a couple things on that. So at the time when we were talking about this, I think I was sort of saying like, look, deconstruct what charter schools are from the public policy power to create public schools that districts do not run. And that the latter, right, and the former too, I'll get to the former in a second, is actually a tool that can help us, A, like make some better political friends, and B, actually solve genuine problems and challenges for families in the COVID crisis, right? I was talking to a friend of mine who runs this organization called A for Arizona in Arizona yesterday, and she was talking about how they have a committee member who is wants to do kind of like an innovation bill, and but sort of wants to anchor it in what public schools do, like traditional public schools, like not public charter schools, whatever. And I was kind of like, look, you know, it's not like there aren't any traditional district school leaders across the country, right, who've done a good job. And I would say that the biggest problem for those districts is that they don't have charter-like freedom and autonomy, right? So you like, you know, March 12th, I think is what it was. That was like the last time I flew. And I remember I was in Georgia, and you guys know I'm on the board of Success Academy, and Eva Moskowitz has like, we're closing, we're going virtual on Monday. And I called her up and I was like, you're awesome, right? And it was great to be able to like make that decision, you know? And then like Monday we were standing up Success Academy virtual, or she was, and I was cheering her on, you know, while New York City Public Schools was still like trying to figure out what it was going to do and who it was going to point a finger at and that kind of stuff. So the one thing I think is really important is that it's like, they're great people everywhere, and we need great people everywhere who are going to try to solve this problem. But the flexibility, freedom, you know, like ability to change, to adapt, that is inherent in the public policy toolbox of charter schooling, right, is the most powerful thing about charter schooling right now. And that the use of that power, right, other than getting families and kids, you know, with like the education that they want and deserve, is also an important way, I think, to help us build better, more diverse new political constituency. Now, here's the second thing about that I think is sort of really important. And just to go back to reference another episode of CharterFolk with Kim Smith, I've thought the same thing, but not said it as elegantly, which should not surprise you. But, you know, there's like a stated preference and there's a revealed preference about school. And I think what we found, especially given 55 million kids are at home, maybe learning, you know, at this point, is that parents said they cared about academics, but what they really cared about was the childcare. Even wealthy parents, right, were basically willing to say, look, I'll pay through the nose. I got this mortgage on my back, right, to get into this school. It ain't that good, but it's mine. And more importantly, I'll double down on museums, trips, tutoring, and all this other stuff to cover up sort of the built-in mediocrity of my neighborhood school, which is mine, right? Now, like what you saw in like Arlington and these other places, that people are like, wait, you telling me you're not gonna watch my kid? Well, hold on. Give me my money back, right? Like give me my money back. And then all of a sudden there are all these people who were not sort of like, you know, thinking about alternatives, you know, private schools, charter schools, like interdistrict, virtual, like why is it that school across the street has kids in person but mine does not? Like they approach that differently, and then all of a sudden, you know, the deal was altered, like sort of Vader and Lando in Empire. And so I set all that up just to say that, like, it's kind of an interesting thing thinking about this question of doing innovation for what reason, and certainly like not just for the sake of innovation at this point, like given the crisis that our children are in and the state they're learning is in overall. The one thing I would just sort of throw out to everybody is that, you know, if you like date somebody and then like you in high school, right? And then you go on your hoity-toity trip to France or whatever. And then you come back and you see the person, you're different people, right? You sort of want different things. And so to me, like 55 million kids in America have been on a date with somebody else that is not their neighborhood public school, right? And when they come back, they're going to want different things, right? They're going to want different things. And so I think that's a huge challenge to traditional district schools, obviously, because you have all these people that were on a loop that they knew and understood and it was predictable. And then they come back and say, hey, I've been learning at 7 o'clock in the evening for the last 6 months. So what is this, right? So people need to be ready for that. And then I think the other thing is that the fact that people will want different things also challenges us to give them the things that they want, right? And so we're these are like Diane, Pat, like you guys run organizations that are about learning, improvement, and reiterating and doing new things. And I think it's a mistake to think that we would be sort of not also under that pressure to give people like the new things that they want after their time away from everything. So again, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be back with your smart friends. So.
Thank you, Derrell. I don't know someone who I learn as much from while simultaneously being entertained as I do you. It's a special gift you got. So thank you for being back again. Hey, I don't really. Let's turn to Diane. Diane, can you just no parameters other than what I did in terms of introducing Derrell's comments? What reactions do you have, and where do you think we stand at this moment as we dive into this topic?
Thanks, Jen. It's good to be here and fun to be in conversation with all of you. And I actually love what Derrell just said. And I mean, I think what I would offer maybe, and I'll be curious to hear what he thinks, is even a little bit more nuance about his comments. I completely agree that what the pandemic has revealed is the number one want and need from parents is childcare for their kids. And let's just pause for a moment and say, that's emotionally hard for educators. I don't know a teacher and a school leader who thinks of themselves as like a daycare or a childcare provider. That's not why we do it. It's not why we go there. And so I think there's a lot of emotion around that realization in this time. And I think it's something that we collectively have to come to terms with, because even if that's what we have been doing, we've not been doing it terribly well, right? Like childcare, if I were going to design it, I would not design it to be from like 8:30 to 3 with a half day, 1 day. Like it's not good for families the way that it is. It could be better. And I would argue that one of the values that charters have brought, a lot of them, is better care, like extended hours, extended time, more flexibility, more responsibility, more responsiveness to families. The second piece I would add is I think that, I would make a friendly amendment and say the next thing that families are looking for is schools that don't close doors for their kids and make sure that they have opportunity. And so I think a lot of what we see in terms of friction between parents and schools is when they feel like the school is not enabling their child to have a pathway to what they want. Obviously, families who are advocating for their children in with special needs are in constant, friction with schools around, are you blocking my child's ability to learn and grow and get certifications and things like that? And so I think a lot of what parents are looking for next after childcare is just the school system controls my child's trajectory and destiny, and I need a school that's not going to block what I want for my child. That's, again, a pretty sad realization. Like, they're not expecting us to help them get there necessarily. Just don't block us, don't stop us, don't prevent us from that. And then I think the third piece is, and as Derrell said, oh, by the way, we actually want our child to learn and grow. And we don't have very high expectations from our school for that. And so we outsource that a lot. I think one thing that has become very clear during the pandemic, we've been doing a lot of work with prepared parents in supporting parents and offering supports and whatnot, is the vast majority of parents do not want to be their child's educator. And so certainly, a lot of people talk about the homeschooling. There is not going to be a massive flood to homeschooling here. People don't want to be their kid's teacher and their educator. They want someone else to do that. They don't have high expectations right now for the schools to do that. But I think they're starting to get pretty angry about that, quite frankly. And I think the shift is, they can see now what's been going on there. So before, great, I'm sending my child to school, I'm getting childcare, and now when it's coming home and they see what was actually going on, I mean, I talked to a mom this past weekend who was like, when I saw what they were sending for I'm like, nope, not doing that. Nope, not doing that. And the mom turned to me and said, my child lives on a farm. She is learning real world skills. She is learning how to be a person in this society. I'm not doing that stuff. And so I think their parents are going to be much more discriminating. This is not nearly as like fun or entertaining as the way Derrell says it, but much more discriminating when they come out of the pandemic about maybe picking and choosing what they will and won't take from the school, given what they, and then figuring out how to get it from somewhere else, because they've had to become resourceful on that front, which I would say leads us to a huge opportunity as charter schools, because I agree completely with Derrell that we have, as much as those freedoms and autonomy are being encroached upon and shrunken, whatever the right word is there, in this time, we still have more opportunity to meet our families where they need us to be. And so I see one of my hopes, and I really hope I'm not disappointed, because so far I kind of am, is that we seize this moment to actually deliver to families.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Diane. Pat, would love to just give general parameters. I will just also put out there for viewers who might not be aware of it, that Friendship has been at the forefront in DC, pushing itself as an organization to do those additional things that parents in DC need. And then also you've been key in terms of rallying the entire charter community, interface with the mayor's team, to set up some dynamics in DC that have just been absolutely, I think, important for kids and families to receive that support, but also for people to understand that charter schools are really making a constructive contribution, both within our unit, within our sphere, but pushing the overall system to do some really positive things. So put that additional context there for you, and then please go where you would like to with your comments.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't want to occupy the space of jerk in this, because I mean, we've got one person who's doing that right now, but there's just so much to unpack, right, from what was just said. And I want to start with this idea that our kids have been out on a date with someone else, and now they're coming back, they're going to want something different. Look, that might be true, but the people handling the arranged marriage, their parents and the village of their school people, are driving in the same way toward the same things that we've always had. And how we break that up is really what we've got to figure out, right? As I am with groups of educators and talking to parents about how we bring kids back and how we recover, a lot of the conversation drives toward delivering what it was we just did before we went out on break. A lot of it does. And I'm not sure that any of the adults should drive this. I think that the kids, is to your point, Derrell, the kids that have said, I've seen something different, when we surveyed them, and yes, they're suffering on the social emotional side, but when we surveyed them about academics and getting their work done, they're like, the feedback I get from my teacher is better. I have less distractions. I can do work when it's best for me. I can move ahead if I want to. I can spend more time on something that I didn't get. They're telling us what works for them. But are we working as hard to build the systems to get what they want? So, that's just something I'd say. I think we're moving toward the arranged marriage to do what it is that we've always done. And we're going to tell kids, you know what? This is your beau. This is what you're doing. This is the way we do it. I hope that doesn't happen. But I think one of the constraining things, and that is sort of what you laid out, what has been laid out, Jed, is the context for this, that you have what is being provided in terms of equity and excellence by public systems, and you have what parents want, or what parents will tolerate and what they will accept. And when I hear the words tolerate, accept, choice, these are false to me. To bring up a troubled person, but certainly a poet in many ways, but Kanye West, who said slavery was 400 years of choice. This isn't choice for our families, right? They're not tolerating it or accepting it. It is the only thing that they've been given. And what do we do, and how do we build? And perhaps it was, someone said earlier, we've got to start building the political capacity and will. For the families that many of us serve, they aren't tolerating education. They are sending their kids to the schools that are available to them, and the education that's available to them that they are compelled to do if those kids are between 5 and 17. And many of our families don't have the ability just to get up and move to someplace else, or to get up and go private. They don't have that. So what they are taking part in every day isn't because it is choice or acceptance or tolerance. It is what we have allowed. And we've got to figure out how we get past that. I want to make another point. When we think about school, and when we think about families, and when we think about what they take on, innovation sounds great. We, this country, the world, created vaccines faster in a way that was never done before. Much of our country, much of the world says those vaccines are game changers. They will let us go back to normal. We're all going to take them. There's a group of families that are saying, no, we're not, right? Innovation reads to some people as risk. And if you've lived in a world of privilege, innovation means you can do something better, faster, more interesting. It means all of those things. Innovation doesn't often mean to you that things can be worse. But many of our families know, yes, things can be worse. And so when we think about this conversation about innovate, charters are innovation, we need to innovate, right? We need to figure out how we're going to build trust, build confidence, build in the voice of the people that we are trying supposedly to serve, and then let them help us deliver something that they want to take a part of because they are comfortable with doing so.
Can I hop onto that?
Please, of course, please.
Continue my jerkdom. So the last spring, I think is what it was, when the sort of reality of all this was kind of descending upon people. I was on like a call of lots of people who work in lots of groups that are nominally like mine. And everybody was like, we got to get kids back in school. We got to get kids back in school. And I can remember really being a skunk at the garden party and saying, in 2019, 18% of African-American fourth graders in this country read at or above grade level on the NEAT, right? And I think what I said is like, I ain't trying to run back to that. We've got to get kids out of that, for 25 years. So like the desired end state, it should not be a return to normal. And like as a kind of a not a challenge, but like kind of a thing that I think charter powers, whatever can be looking at about. And I've written a bunch of stuff about like sort of like authorizing principles and like inverting them to have more community voice. So like I totally dig where you come from, Pat. But so it's like tutoring. So I'm generally supportive of the idea that we should be like tutoring everybody, right? We're probably going to do a paper that's called Tutor Everybody, But what I keep hearing is basically that the same people responsible for the 18% should be the people doing it. And we're going to organize all the regulations to make sure they're the only people who get to do it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Right? So I just want to like Great Oaks, for instance, is a charter school that has like a tutoring component built in, at Success, we have like a bunch of high school kids who are tutoring middle school kids, right? Like they wouldn't get a chance to do this, under that. We can do that, right? Like that's, so I just want to like highlight that because like I'm 100%, my future forward take, and by the way, innovation does not poll well with parents, just throw that out there too. But my future forward take notwithstanding, I remain concerned that almost a year out of school, people have forgotten what we left, right? It's just the golden glow of what we had. It's the safety of something you knew, even if it wasn't great. And it's super important to always kind of like have that at the front. Like we don't want to go back to what we had. We want to go back to something that is significantly better, right? That meets people on terms that the old thing did not meet them upon. So.
Can I just add something? And I have a question for Diane. So one thing is, when I think about sort of the tutoring and the et cetera and the innovation, we're all constrained by these grants that say, oh, wait, we're only going to fund you if you show us that you're doing something that has some proof. Yeah, the proof yielded 18% of the kids who are at the 4th grade level not reading, right? So, I mean, or only 18% are reading. So even the legislation and the regulations are constraining what you could try to do something new. Tell me to take what we've done over the last 6 months and create schools from that, because I can show you what kids it's working for. Let me tell you, Friendship Run's the only public online school in the district, whether traditional or charter. Those kids are a year and a half ahead, right? They look like the rest of our student body, but they've been set up to do the work virtually. So we know we could get there with other kids. So we shouldn't come back the same. So anyway, just wanted to mention that. But Diane, you mentioned something about childcare, and I found it fascinating in terms of thinking about what parents want and what they're screaming about, and it's childcare. I think that we all, as educators, as people leading educational organizations, need to come to terms with this. African-American families, poor families, are saying, I'm not sending my kids back like everybody.
Right. That's right.
Take your child care and, hit the road with it. It's other families that are talking about child care.
Yeah.
So is there an opportunity right now to talk about equity and to deliver to those families who say, I will figure out a way to deal with my child care so that my child stays home and what I think is safe, give me better programming? Like, when in the world, when you think about the rhetoric that goes around, particularly in America, have you had a chance where you've got Black families saying, child care? No. I want better programming. And then we're well-to-do families are saying, wait, please watch my kid from 8. I don't
Totally. I couldn't agree with you more, Pat. And that actually is reflected in our, schools and our students. I mean, we're in constant conversation with our families that are very diverse by design. So some it's always been incredibly diverse. And what you're saying is absolutely true. Most of our Black families are saying, I don't want my child going back there. It's not safe for a variety of reasons. And there are real challenges also with being at home. I think what your question and your comment suggests to me is like, I'm really struggling. I'm curious your guys' thoughts with this idea, this national conversation about learning loss. And here's where I think it's really detrimental that we're framing the conversation as learning loss, because, I have a lot of Black families who are literally thriving right now. They don't have to be out in the world. They're home as a family. They're learning together. They're connected to their extended family. They feel much safer in that space, especially in the world that we are living in right now. And yet the world is talking about how their kids are losing all of this learning. And what it says to me is we value math and reading scores. That's it, literally, which is actually not necessarily learning or anything that matters to those kids. And we also don't even understand how kids learn, because you don't actually need a whole year to learn something necessarily. What we know is with the right tools, the right supports, etc., like a child could learn in 3 days what might take a whole year in a classroom. And so there's this concept of loss is really problematic to me, and says that we're not taking advantage of all what we could be gaining right in this moment and learning in this moment and doing in this moment. And like you, Pat, a bunch of my kids are accelerating. Why? Because because we have a personalized approach, because, they can work at their own pace even more than they could in our schools normally. They're getting better feedback, all of those things that are happening. And There's a whole bunch of policy people and people at the top who all they care about is, well, we don't have test scores and we don't know how much kids are losing right now as opposed to what they're gaining. And the last piece I would just say on that is to all of your point, like, I don't like the word innovation. I've never liked the word innovation. I think that, some people think it's innovative. We've always had mentors in our schools for our kids for the last 20 years and we've always centered on building strong relationship and making sure people belong and that they have connection. And so when we went out in March, Derrell, like success, we went out, we've been virtual ever since, we went out, I think March 16th was our last day in buildings. We've still been out. We have maintained and increased this connection because we already had the structures in place to make sure that kids weren't lost and that they were connected. And, and I don't want to minimize, there's significant challenges. A bunch of our families have very fragile living situations and economic situations. And so that is a struggle, but because we're connected, we can help and support them. And that's not innovative. Like, the idea of a child having a mentor is not innovative, but no one does it in the country. None of our schools do it. And so it's not really about like making up something new. I think it's about doing the things we know actually work, because most people just don't do those things.
It reminds me of a time when I was with Larry Rosenstock while I was still at High Tech High, and he was watching me present in front of a large group, and came off and he said, good job. Please do not ever refer to High Tech High as cutting edge again. That is not what we are about. We are about getting great stuff, a lot of stuff which we've known since back to whatever, time in history. Let me I think it's a good time to just try and connect two other things. One is we are recording, which grows out of what you guys have been saying. We are recording on the day after Howard Fuller turned 80 years old.
Wow.
And he said on the second CharterFolk chat here, how when he looks at New Orleans, while there were good things that happened, certainly, he also sees just the huge missed opportunity because we could have gotten so much more done, right? But Pat, to your question, a lot of the issues out of New Orleans that I think Howard was putting his finger on were related to trust, right? Who's going to be able to do these things? What direction exactly are we going in? And the fact that we didn't have the level of trust that we would have wanted probably, resulted in far less positive change happening than would have otherwise. The second, the main theme is, I've just got all these books about, failure to disrupt, rewiring education, this sense, that of dispiritedness about, charter schools not offering the level of innovation, as we would have wanted. How do we tackle this moment so that we can really capitalize on what Howard believes to be a huge moment of opportunity now? How do we do it in such a way as that we can have the level of trust that we need? How much of it is really school specific, and each individual organization's got to figure out what these new things are, and it's context specific and it's culturally sensitive and all this. And how much of it is, wait a second, there are things that are impeding us. And a part of the innovation is, can we come together in new ways and become enough of a political force to be able to push things open both for ourselves and for broader public education? So whoever wants to jump in, I hope that's a good prompt, and take it whatever direction you would like.
Pat, did you want to go first, or?
How do we capitalize? How do we do this time? How do we not miss this opportunity? It's just,
okay.
I'm going to
go first.
So that you can pick it apart,
I'm going to go first. Here we go. So listen, we've got kids that are, they've got all the content laid out in front of them. They've got their computers at home. They've got their internet, and they, see what the teacher wants them to do. They look across a week's worth of work. It's Monday night. They do an all-nighter. They do everything. And the next day, they're a little tired. They don't check into the class at morning, but all their assignments are there for the entire week. It gets to be Friday, and that teacher comes forward, and they're like, well, I'm giving this kid an F. Give him an F. Why are you giving him an F? because they didn't show up on Tuesday at 9:01 a.m. to 9:14. But we're looking at all their assignments. They're right there, right? Like they've done the work. They know the test. Do you want to give them a little test? You think, maybe somebody else in their family did the work? How we take advantage of this moment is to recognize that the adults have been set up to do what they do over and over and over. And we keep talking about disrupting learning for kids as if we have to give them something different. Well, we got to reshape the minds of the people that are delivering to kids, right? And so, between grades that are some artificial construct that we put out and course sequences and seat time, you have stuck people in between these bookends that they can't break out what they can do, right? They can't break out how kids can do it differently. And so I'm probably not answering your question, but somehow we have to remap this, right? We need to all collectively go and say, we're done with seat time, right? Everybody join us. No, strike it out. Let it be gone. You want to have proof of why, someone has learned something, then we can use, there are many ways to get that proof that doesn't have to do with hours of sitting in a class, right? So I think that the disruption has to be aimed at the policies and the regulations that mean that even people that come into this work with different views are forced to take the same steps as everybody else. I think that's number one. Number two, I think that disruption in many industries is fueled by the jumping of generations, right? Like you've got, 50, 60, 70-year-old people that are running something, and then the 20-somethings come in. But education is never like that because we see every successive college-educated group coming in year by year. And so it's so small that the shifting in thinking isn't dramatic enough between the people that are running things and the people that are delivering. And so, I have a lot of friendship alumni. I'm like, come back and work with us because I need people that were close to being recipients of what we've done coming in to tell now other adults, now because they're, 21, 22, 23. Yeah, this wasn't as good as you thought it was, right? And recognizing that I've got to give them the tools to do so because most of our alumni think that we are, the best thing since sliced bread, right? But really having them say, when I went to college, I had this, and this is why it was great. But somehow we've got to figure that out because I think education is so slow because ideas aren't coming in from really people that are that distant or distant enough from the work.
I think if I get a little bit of what I think Pat is talking about, and I totally agree, the social scientists call it institutional isomorphism, and I call it the Blade Runner problem. So like I like movies, and Blade Runner, which is based on Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, is like a defining vision for the future, right? Like the cars in the sky, the climate's all over the place, whatever. And that movie was so brilliantly rendered that people were just like, I'm going to do my movie in that version of the future. And so for like 30 years, people are basically just adopting the vocabulary of Blade Runner to do their movies, right? And so in one respect, that makes it a lot easier to do your movie. In another respect, it means every movie over time is increasingly more similar, right? And so I kind of highlight that to say back to this point about the the F word of this conversation, innovation, is that some people look at the public policy power to charter as a thing to innovate, right? As like a launch pad. I think what we shouldn't be aiming for necessarily is like sparkles. What we should be aiming for is difference, right? And that is the thing. So the sector, I guess, like broadly, bits and like the focus on math and language arts course has a role to play in this. And certainly I'm a person who supports literacy and numeracy and annual assessments. In particular, I support annual assessments because if they go away, a lot of charter renewals are going to be in a lurch, which is an unintended consequence of the waivers of the spring. So just throw that out there because that's the thing, but over time, like we just got into a tight vocabulary of what it meant to be a good charter school. right? And that thing, like, and we've gotten really good at doing that, and like the iterations are small, but they're impactful for like hundreds of thousands of kids across the country in wildly positive ways. But they don't bring much difference into the universe. And so one of the things I think we should just, let's think about innovation as a bias towards difference, right? And then what are all the things, like what are all the problems we can solve in the moment, like while doing that? And how, again, I keep bringing it back because this is my day job, how does the act of putting the third like leg on that triangle give us like better support, more diverse support, right? More people who feel like they got the school they wanted, right? Instead of the school that we wanted to give them. This one little kind of soundbite on this. I was talking to somebody about this. I want to make sure I hit it the right way. I've basically been to every kind of school I could go to, but I didn't go to a charter school because there weren't any when I went to school, right? So private schools value their oldness, right? For the most part, like people look at charter schools, and charter schools value their newness, right? The aspects of new, like the approach to data, the results orientation, whatever. Like district schools value like their hooks in community, for good and ill, which is why you can have a conversation with somebody in Newark whose grandmother, mother, brother, cousin went to a school with 10% proficiency, but they ride or die for it because of the football team, And so like you can think of that like poor, like, ill, or it's awesome, but it's real, right? And I think we could use this bias towards difference to turn up the community some more, right? In a way that helps amplify those other things I was talking about.
Can I'm excited to be here with you, Derrell, and you said something, but you said it very quickly and a little bit in passing. I want to go back to it because when Pat was speaking and she was talking about some of the constraints we have about doing the right thing, I put in that bucket one of the most significant constraints, our sort of national testing regimen, quite frankly. And the belief and expectation that, whether it be 1 year or 1.5 years of growth on very narrow math and reading exams in only certain grades, is the gold standard, and it drives all of the behavior and everything, is completely constraining and confining us around doing what we need to do and what's best for kids. And I'm really trying to be open. And so in my view, like the pandemic is like this perfect opportunity to sort of set those aside for a little bit, do what we need to do to really serve kids. And I'm trying to be really open to people who make really compelling arguments about, but like those exams are what helped all of us see the inequities and not hide them anymore and bring them out of the shadows and whatnot. And so I'm really trying to figure out, is there like an in-between here? Because I really do believe they're constraining most people's choices, behaviors, and ability to meet the needs of kids. And I'm not sure, honestly, that testing for the next couple of years, first of all, I'm 100% convinced it's not best what's for our kids in terms of a social, emotional, mental health approach, number one. Number two, what we have to expend as schools to figure out how to do those exams in this time, and the stress about that is crazy. And so I guess my wondering is, like, if we just didn't do them for a couple of years, just a couple of years, I mean, do we really think things are going to change that much in that time? Are we really going to learn anything? And is the trade-off too great?
It's
doing that.
So I mean, the answer is yes. No. I mean, look. So so at 50 Can, like, our folks have like fought for these things for a long time with the underlying rationale that you raised, right? Which is that, like, in their absence, millions of kids of color were absolutely getting screwed by like underperforming, education systems across America. And that you make the case of charters, you make the case for choice, you make the case for teacher eval, or any of these other things, however you feel about them, like that it's just rooted at a baseline in that transparency, right? At the same time, like, so we think they're important, right? And at the same time, we completely acknowledge the fact that they are a drag on the very same creativity we've been sort of talking about, right? And I think one of the questions of that, and then there's like a little addendum to it, is about trust, right? It's about intent. So there are people that we know don't want these things in place, not because they want people to more flexibly approach the problem, but because they want to be able to hide the problem.
Yeah.
Right? And so we are like dealing with that, like on a day-to-day basis. So I just think it's important to kind of highlight that. The addendum is that, Mark, who's my boss, another person like my esteemed guest who's smarter than I am, we co-wrote this paper called Measure Everything. And it was just about like what opportunity to sort of like look at success do we have in this window? And we were kind of like, look, in our network, parents are saying, all right, we were fine with giving you the spring off, but I want to know where my baby is, And so like we sort of advocated for, like if you want it, go get it, like free, get a diagnostic, find out where your kid is, And then for the reasons I just described, we're like, we still think the annual assessment is important, even if there are no sanctions, because the ritual matters and because the information matters. But the third thing, which I think is probably the most important thing, again, another place for charters to think about, innovate, do because you can, right? Is that like annual assessment data is very important if you are like a district leader or a state leader and you want to intervene or you want to like distribute resources. Nominally important to parents. Like parents want to know if they want to know if their kids are on grade level, whatever. But there are all kinds of other information that like assessment information that is more important to kids and families than that. Right. So for instance, behind me, which you cannot see, is a bike that's been on a trainer forever. Right. If the head unit isn't on, I'm not getting on it. Right. Because my Strava matters a great deal to me. Right. Like that is my information. Right. And so right now, like Pat, you sort of talked about it with the kid who's killing it on Monday. So we can have the rest of the week free. Dan, I think you talked about it a little bit too. The fact that people are in this mode of having to learn everywhere, right, for good or ill, to me presents this great opportunity of like, how do I advance the instincts of that in a way that articulates to like success, the accrual of rewards in a traditional K-12 framework, So like, if I can learn French on my own, I can demonstrate it on this app. Like, why don't I get credit for it? That kind of thing. Like, I think that is an incredible place to think about that gets us like, to this place you're talking about where it's like, yeah, I'm not constrained by the annual assessment, right? Still gives us the information that we want.
Right. And I'm sure Pat has these. We do. Like we already, again, we don't need to make these things up. We have them. I'm sure, Pat, you have them. Like we have literally, worked with the people who made Smarter Balance to build a whole rubric that's valid, reliable, that gives our families, our kids, our teachers day-to-day information about exactly where our kids are with real feedback and PD attached to it and all of that. But no one cares because it's not the state test, And so I go into these charter renewal hearings and I've got that and all my kids going to college persistence data, like well-being measures, and the authorizer's like, we don't care about any of that. We just care about those damn test scores, And if they're similar to the district, they're like, well, why do you exist then? We're like, well, all these other things, So I don't know, Pat, like.
I'm with you. But first of all, we know when our kids are learning and we know when they're not, regardless of whether or not we have the test. Yes, I have been a supporter of testing because we want to know how kids are doing versus others.
Sure.
But, a lot of that is because we get a state report card and we want an A because, those were the students that we were. And so, again, it comes down to the things that we put out as values for regulation. If my state report card is made up of dual enrollment and park testing and attendance and whatever, even if that doesn't work for kids, people are going to drive toward those aspects of it. And that's the problem. And that's what's constraining really, innovation for that or difference or being different. And we've got to deal with it. Right. I think that for me, when I think about our schools, and I've been saying this for a while, I've been saying this for at least 2 years when I discovered Amazon Fresh, and I have not been in a grocery store since, because I can order something at 11 p.m. and groceries are on my doorstep at 6 a.m. And, there might be a little bit of a day delay with the pandemic and all. But I would say to people, and I say to people in friendship, okay, I want groceries at this time and I can get them, right? And I'm relatively old. I might be the oldest person on this call right now. But the point is that our kids have grown up with this, right? Where they have their phones with them from all time. Most of them have them from the time they're in middle school, some even when they're in upper elementary. And if they want to know something, if I want to know something, I'm looking it up right in that instant, right? A moment doesn't go by without me having that knowledge. And yet we have continued to set up schools from Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 or 7 to 3 or whatever it is. And my hope is, and we've known about the Amazon Fresh. We've known how we as adults have operated to access whatever we want, whenever we want it, particularly information and knowledge, right? But we haven't allowed that to our kids. They can do it for entertainment, but they can't do it for learning, right? They can do it for entertaining. They can't do it for learning. So, and again, I go back to the adults. What's wrong with us? Like our kids shouldn't have to wait till 10 years from now when they're actually controlling things to be able to get it. And my hope with the pandemic, this terrible pandemic that we all acknowledge, right, has been devastating for life and economy and other things, is that if there's anything that comes out of it, is that we move faster to having proven that some kids are learning. And if we don't sweep that under the carpet, if we don't use tests to say, oh, wait, it was only 18% and now it's 17.5%. Yeah, but 10% of those kids were didn't do it before, right? Yeah. How do we pull that out and how do we amplify it and how do we say it works? Because I've got students on IEPs. I've got some autistic students. I have a family member sent me a video and she said, I was so worried that my child would lose, and they're doing better, right? And so we've got to find a way to get that out to people so that we can make the change now and not have to wait for our own Blade Runner, 2021, but it's 2042 because we haven't gotten there yet. Right.
It's a very good movie.
Guys, I would love to stay out of the way of this and just let it keep going for another couple hours. But to put some kind of bookend on this, right? Let's give each of you guys 2 minutes to wrap up. I want to just and my question is really, I personally think that there's a very important combination of things that need to happen with individual schools running and taking territory wherever we can, taking advantage of the opportunity. Get our settlements, or however you want to describe it. The other thing that's really important, I think, is we got to get others from outside of charter school space to be commanding territory as well. However we can get them the freedom to do what they want to do. And then once we've got it, we got to get our acts together to figure out how we now redraw borders to be able to give a whole heck of a lot more space for everybody to go forward in this. My concern is that the conversations within the charter world on those two things, encouragement to individual organizations, go do it. You do it. I'm doing it. Hey, by the way, what are those things happening? Is there something that CharterFolk or other organizations should be doing? And then also, what are these things that we should be advocating for more broadly? It's going to require discussion. So just to wrap things up, is there something that we should be doing right now to be stimulating the conversations, building the commitment, being at one another's back, so that this moment that Howard, is identifying, you're all identifying as a key one. We're not looking back at 10 years from now, 15 years from now as perhaps the biggest, missed opportunity in a generation.
Okay, all right. I hate uncomfortable pauses. I'm gonna answer a slightly different question because we have people who run schools and they can talk to that in a way that is much more elegant than I can. To me, there is a separate item that every charter school and every school, frankly, in America should have on its docket right now, and that is graduating people who are able to discern the difference between truth and fiction, and who are interested in making sure that we continue as a republic in a way that is not destructive and divisive, but that brings us together around the highest ideals of what the American experiment is supposed to be about. And, I think last week we saw what happens when that doesn't happen. I think every educator, every person who's got the ability to think about how to make our children more resilient against the false and more durable against the inherently sort of like divisive algorithms of social media platforms should put that right up at the top. Because we're gonna, there's certainly lots of other things that are incredibly important, and educators across the country of all ilks have a lot to do, but you got to do this too. That is my closing thought.
Jed, I think I can build on that, and I like the idea of giving Pat the last word, and say, I agree with you, Derrell, and I think that the types of schools that I think Pat and I are running and designing actually achieve what you're talking about. When you focus on educating a whole human being, and you don't just focus on math and reading results, but you actually focus on thinking and the big skills and problem solving and collaborating and working together, like that is achieving the goal that you are talking about, especially, and for us in a diverse by design community. And so I don't think we're doing it perfectly, but I think we're doing it well. And I think it's consistent with what we know about the science of learning and what we need to do to have equitable environments. And so I think the challenge, I would say, in the charter sector is, we came into being and have really thrived by being really good at the efficiencies of running school, like being really excellent at running schools in ways that a traditional sort of more bureaucratic system wasn't. And I think there's a lot of fear in the sector about what it would mean to shift our pedagogy and our approach to what Derrell is bringing up. Because, oh my gosh, how am I going to get my charter approved? How am I going to get my next one open? How am I going to get the funding, which is based on these very narrow metrics? And so I think we need the courage to create the schools Derrell is talking about, which is scary for the adults because they're worried about losing the existing schools they have or not being able to open more if they don't play by the rules of the system, which are confining.
All right. Well, it is scary for the adults. It's scary for the adults in some ways because we want to say to kids, here's what's fact, and here's what's knowledge, and here's what's evidence, and consume it how I told you to. And we see where that got us last week, right? I mean, we've got to teach the powers of discernment and help kids to understand. But moreover, we have to allow them to consume knowledge and information, right, that they can digest. When, where, and how they choose to, and we need to give them credit for it. And what we need to do is to take our curriculum and our programs and make it accessible to them, whether they're coming to the schoolhouse or they're staying at home or they're at the library, in ways that they can get it in whatever. I've got a whole bunch of devices around me, right? In all the ways that they can, and give them credit for it. And it's not just about making it available. Them getting credit for it means that we've got to take on the political machines that want to capture kids between 8 to 5 or 9 to 4 or 7 to 3 from Monday to Friday. We've got to take them on. We've got to capture the ones that say, wait a minute, I did a beautiful job with my legislation and kids have to take 4 years of Spanish and 3 years of gym or whatever it might be. And we've got to take that on because that is how we will deliver learning where, when, and how, and give kids credit, which is what it's going to look like for them in college anyway, or whatever else they choose to do. In work, it's going to look that way, right? And we all know that now as adult America debates, are we ever going back to the office?
Yeah.
Let's put our kids in a position to be part of the world that is barreling down on us like a runaway train. And so that's what I hope that every school will do, but certainly Sharp. Let's get started.
Well, guys, I'm just thrilled by this conversation. I've learned so much from it. I would just say that this great disconnect happens at a moment when charter schools are under attack. And I think we felt as though there's like less oxygen in all the rooms where we are at this moment that it's happened. And yet, if there's ever a moment that we want the charter sector to have as much oxygen, to have the energy, to have the creativity, it is that. And it's my sense that oxygen comes into rooms through who you invite. And when you invite such stunning people as yourselves, you can breathe. And I can tell you, I've just breathed through this entire hour together. So I just thank you for everything that you guys are doing for your schools. I thank you for what you're doing more broadly in the sector. And I really thank you for coming together for CharterFolk and this conversation today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jen.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, folks.